The last thing I did before disappearing was close the door. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, the way you close something you don't plan to return to. No goodbye messages. No explanations. No emotional speeches. I didn't want closure. I wanted escape. For years, my life had felt like a room with no windows. Everything was familiar. Predictable. Controlled. And slowly, unbearably suffocating. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. I had a routine, a job, people who recognized my name. I was stable. That word followed me everywhere like a badge of honor. But stability can feel like a cage when you stop recognizing the person inside it. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to disappear. I faded first. Conversations became shorter. Emotions became quieter. My presence became optional. People noticed I was distant, but no one asked why. Distance is easy to ignore when it doesn't create problems. And I was very good at not creating problems. Inside, though, I felt like my life was running on autopilot. Days passed without meaning. Weeks blurred together. Everything I did felt automatic, mechanical, detached. I wasn't living. I was maintaining. The breaking point didn't come from a tragedy. It came from emptiness. A kind of emptiness that doesn't scream, it whispers. One evening, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the life I had built, and felt absolutely nothing. Not sadness. Not anger. Not even disappointment. Just nothing. That terrified me more than pain ever could. Pain means you care. Numbness means you're disappearing. So I made a decision no one saw coming. I left. I didn't tell my co-workers. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell the people who thought they knew me. I packed light. Just the essentials. No memories. No reminders. No anchors. I told myself I wasn't running away. I was starting over. A new city. A new name. A new version of me. No expectations. No history. No pressure to be who I used to be. For the first time in years, I felt free. The silence of my new life felt peaceful. No one recognized me. No one expected anything from me. I was invisible. And invisibility felt like relief. I rented a small room in a place where no one asked questions. I took a job that didn't care about my past. I walked streets where my name meant nothing. I became a stranger. And for a while, that was enough. Every morning felt lighter. I didn't carry old roles, old mistakes, old versions of myself. I was just a person moving through the world. No reputation. No identity. No story. But something strange happened. The silence followed me. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind. I started noticing the same emptiness creeping back into my new life. The same numb routines. The same quiet detachment. Different place. Same feeling. I had escaped my surroundings. But I hadn't escaped myself. The more I tried to erase my past, the more it echoed in my thoughts. Not as memories, as patterns. The way I avoided people, the way I avoided emotions. The way I avoided myself. I realized something uncomfortable. I didn't disappear to start over. I disappeared to avoid confronting who I had become. I had hoped distance would create transformation. But distance only creates silence. And silence doesn't heal. It hides. In the quiet of my new life, I started asking myself questions I had avoided for years. What was I running from? Who was I trying to escape? What part of me did I refuse to face? The answers weren't dramatic. They were honest. I was running from responsibility. From emotional depth. From the uncomfortable truth that my old life didn't fail me, I failed to engage with it. I hadn't lost meaning. I had stopped searching for it. And changing locations doesn't change your internal direction. Every night, I sat alone with my thoughts, realizing that starting over wasn't as simple as leaving. You can't outrun yourself. You can only meet yourself. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Because disappearing is easy. Rebuilding is not. At first, my new life felt like a blank page. No past. No explanations. No emotional obligations. I told myself this was freedom. But freedom without direction is just another form of emptiness. My days settled into a rhythm that looked peaceful on the surface. I woke up early, worked quietly, spoke to people only when necessary. No one asked about my history, and I never volunteered it. Invisibility became my comfort. When no one knows you, no one expects anything from you. When no one expects anything, you don't have to be anyone. That felt safe. But safety has a way of becoming loneliness when it lasts too long. The city was different, but the silence inside me was the same. I walked unfamiliar streets, past unfamiliar faces, lived inside unfamiliar walls. And yet, I felt painfully familiar to myself. The same emotional distance. The same avoidance. The same quiet detachment from my own life. I hadn't changed. I had relocated. I started to notice how carefully I kept people at arm's length. Conversations stayed shallow. Relationships stayed temporary. I avoided anything that required emotional presence. Because emotional presence forces reflection. And reflection brings back what you're trying to forget. The past didn't follow me as memories. It followed me as patterns. The way I disappeared from my old life wasn't new. I had been disappearing long before I physically left. I disappeared from conversations. From connections. From myself. The move just made it visible. One evening, after work, I sat in a small cafe, watching people talk, laugh, exist together. Their voices filled the space with something I didn't recognize anymore. Connection. Not dramatic. Not intense. Just real. And I realized how long it had been since I felt part of anything. Not because I lacked opportunity. Because I avoided vulnerability. In my old life, I blamed routine. In my new life, I blamed distance. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid of being seen. Being seen means being known. Being known means being understood. Being understood means being held accountable for who you are. And I wasn't sure I liked who I had become. The loneliness in my new life wasn't loud. It was quiet, constant, and heavy. Not painful enough to force change. Not peaceful enough to feel like peace. Just, present. I began to realize that disappearing didn't erase my identity. It only removed distractions. Without familiar roles, titles, and expectations, I was left with myself. And I didn't know what to do with that. My old life had given me structure. My new life gave me silence. Neither gave me meaning. One night, I looked at my reflection in a dark window and felt something shift. I didn't recognize the person staring back. Not because I had changed. Because I had stopped defining myself. I had erased my past without creating a future. I existed in the space between. Not who I was. Not who I wanted to be. Just someone who moved through days without purpose. The escape I had dreamed of turned into a mirror I couldn't avoid. And what I saw wasn't failure. It was avoidance. I hadn't disappeared to start over. I had disappeared to avoid facing my dissatisfaction. But dissatisfaction doesn't disappear when you change your address. It waits. Quietly. Patiently. For the moment you stop running. I started remembering things I had buried. Not specific events, emotions. The frustration of feeling disconnected. The exhaustion of pretending everything was fine. The quiet despair of living a life that didn't feel like mine. Those feelings hadn't belonged to my old city. They belonged to me. I realized I hadn't left because my life was wrong. I left because I didn't know how to live it honestly. Running was easier than changing. Silence was easier than confrontation. Disappearing was easier than rebuilding. But easy doesn't mean healing. My new life wasn't giving me peace. It was giving me space. And space only helps if you fill it with something real. Otherwise, it just echoes. In the quiet of my new existence, I finally admitted something to myself. I wasn't trying to start over. I was trying to erase. Erase mistakes. Erase expectations. Erase the version of me that felt like a disappointment. But erasing your past doesn't create a future. It just creates absence. I didn't need a new city. I needed a new relationship with myself. And that was the one place I couldn't escape. Because no matter how far you run, you always arrive where you are. There is a moment when running stops feeling like movement. And starts feeling like standing still in a different place. Mine came on a night when the city was quiet enough for my thoughts to finally speak. No distractions. No noise. Just me and the version of myself I had been avoiding. I realized something uncomfortable. I didn't disappear to find myself. I disappeared to avoid myself. The past I was running from wasn't made of people, places, or mistakes. It was made of feelings. Disappointment. Unfulfilled expectations. The quiet realization that my life didn't feel like mine. Changing cities didn't change that. It only removed the scenery. In the silence of my new life, I could no longer blame routines, responsibilities, or circumstances. There was nothing left to hide behind. No familiar roles. No old excuses. No external pressure. Just me. And I didn't know who I was without the story I had escaped from. For a long time, I had believed that starting over meant erasing the past. But erasing doesn't heal. It just delays understanding. I began to notice how my emotions had been locked away for years. I didn't feel deeply anymore, not sadness, not joy, not connection. I had trained myself to stay neutral. Neutral feels safe. But neutral also feels empty. The truth was, I wasn't afraid of my past. I was afraid of my own dissatisfaction. Because dissatisfaction forces you to ask questions. Why am I unhappy? What am I missing? What part of my life feels unfinished? And unfinished things demand action. Action is harder than escape. One night, instead of trying to distract myself, I stayed with the discomfort. I let the silence sit with me. I allowed myself to feel what I had been avoiding. Not dramatic emotions. Honest ones. Loneliness. Disconnection. The quiet sadness of living without meaning. For the first time, I didn't run from it. I listened. And what I heard wasn't failure. It was clarity. I didn't hate my old life. I hated how disconnected I felt inside it. And now, in my new life, I felt the same way. The problem wasn't the place. It was the distance between my actions and my values. I had spent years living on autopilot, making choices that made sense instead of choices that felt true. I had avoided emotional risk, avoided uncertainty, avoided asking myself what I actually wanted. Disappearing was just another form of avoidance. But you can't outrun the questions that live inside you. They follow you quietly. I realized I didn't need a new identity. I needed honesty. Honesty about what I wanted. Honesty about what I feared. Honesty about the parts of myself I had ignored. So I stopped hiding. Not from the world. From myself. I started allowing small, uncomfortable truths to exist. That I wanted connection. That I missed feeling alive. That I didn't want to keep living on emotional autopilot. I didn't need to go back to my old life. I needed to stop running from my inner one. My new life didn't become perfect. It became intentional. I began making choices that felt aligned, not just convenient. I allowed myself to be seen, even when it felt uncomfortable. I let people get close again, even when it meant risk. Not because it was easy. Because it was real. For the first time in a long time, I felt present in my own life. Not because everything was solved. Because I stopped avoiding what needed to be faced. Disappearing had taught me something important. You can change your location, you can change your name. You can change your routine. But you can't change your inner direction without honesty. Escape gives you distance. Honesty gives you growth. I didn't need to vanish to start over. I needed to show up. For my emotions. For my values. For the version of myself I had been neglecting. If you're listening to this and thinking about running from your life, I want you to understand something. Sometimes, the problem isn't where you are. It's how disconnected you feel inside it. You don't need to disappear to begin again. You need to be present. Present with your discomfort. Present with your desires. Present with the truth about who you are and who you want to become. Because starting over doesn't require distance. It requires honesty. And honesty is the only place real change begins. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But truthfully.